Hello, my name is Benjamin Hart. I'm an American attorney and the managing director of Integrity Legal here in Bangkok, Thailand. As the title of this video suggests, we're discussing the embattled Pheu and their plans. Under this great pressure, their big plan is let's create a more totalitarian tax system and go after tracking and tracing the poorest members of society. Let's just dive into this. Thought of making this video after reading a recent article from the Thai Examiner, thaiexaminer.com. Article is titled, "Huge Economic Change as Reverse Tax Plan is Being Pushed by the Pheu Government as it Battles On." First of all, it's not a reverse tax plan. That is one prong of this where there would be some kind of negative income tax kind of setup, but it's only after everyone in the whole country gets registered for taxation and they go after the people in the black economy or the informal economy, as they call it, which are, you guessed it, the poorest street vendors and things here in Bangkok, the folks who are just trying to make a living hand to mouth, day to day. Yeah, let's track and trace all of those people and let's go after their sustenance. Let me quote directly here, quoting directly. And I love all the terminology, embattled and it battles on and all, just stop. Quoting directly, Pheu pushes a bold reverse tax plan as 60.8 million residents and 600K businesses must file returns. Quoting further, allowing low-income households to receive payments aiming to tackle Thailand's black economy. I love this. It's always this, oh, well, you're going to get free money. It's free money, but it's only after you come under this totalitarian tax scheme. Quoting further, boost fiscal accountability and counter rising inequality. Again, oh yeah, that's always the hue and cry of socialists and communists. We got to stop all this inequality. All that inequality is free market entrepreneurialism. Quoting further, the embattled Pheu government is pressing ahead with economic reform, even as the Shinawats face critical court cases from August 29th to September 9th. On August 1, the U.S. confirmed a 19% tariff, a rare win for Thailand's battered economy. Yeah, I love how a 19% tariff is being spun as a rare win. Insofar as it is lower than, I believe, any of the other countries in Southeast Asia and on par with Cambodia's, it's still a 19% VIG. I mean, how's that really a win in the grand scheme of things? Meanwhile, maybe Trump has economic advisors that know things I don't, or maybe he knows things I don't. But I find it very both ironic, paradoxical, odd, and possibly economically unsound to impose tariffs when the Tariffs dilemma is also operational. But for those who don't understand, the Tariffs dilemma basically stipulates that a world reserve currency, the country that has a world reserve currency, will find its own economy hollowed out as time goes on. Because what basically happens is the makers of the world reserve currency, the creators, what is that called? Seigniorage, or as de Gaulle put it, exorbitant privilege. Basically the ability to generate the reserve currency and gain goods and services thereby. Basically what happens over time is the reserve currency creator is just handing out money and getting goods and services. There's not really a value for value exchange occurring. That was what Bretton Woods was sort of designed to ameliorate, because it was this sort of indirect gold system. But then in '71, when Nixon took us off the gold standard or temporarily closed the gold window, from that point forward, it's basically been an ever-increasing acuity, or acuteness of, how would I call it, this Tariffs dilemma is basically what we're talking about. So the point I'm trying to make with regard to that is, I see Trump's points regarding tariffs, and to my mind, there may be some justification, and I do understand his desire, and I agree with his desire to re-onshore manufacturing back in the United States. That said, we've got a history of tariffs being problematic, Smoot-Hawley, for example, and we've never seen it, to best of my mind, imposed where you also have the Tariffs dilemma operating, and it calls into question in my mind, what is the interaction of those two economic dynamics going to be? Remains to be seen, and we'll keep you updated on the channel. That said, Rare win, I think, is kind of an odd way of putting that. Quoting further, despite a 6.9% drop in tourist arrivals so far this year, growth is still targeted at 2.3%, buoyed by strong exports in the first half of the year. Next week, the Finance Ministry announced a groundbreaking reverse tax system. That is a very disingenuous way to describe this. No, it's an attempt at totalitarian scrutiny, oversight, tracking and tracing and taxation of, frankly, the poorest levels of the Thai socioeconomic strata. Quoting further, to tackle the black economy, some 60.8 million residents and 600,000 businesses must file tax returns, while low-income households will receive payments to offset taxes. To offset. Why not just not tax them in the first place at all and leave them alone and let them just earn their money? Quoting further, the move could transform fiscal accountability and crack down on unreported income nationwide. Why do we need a crackdown on that? Why is the presumption that people owe something? What is that based off of? People don't owe money just because they're breathing. You know, that's nonsense. People have a right to earn their own living. You know, it's sort of like during COVID, and by the way, all of this seems WEF-inspired, just like COVID was WEF-inspired. And, you know, during COVID, we had to deal with the whole, oh, because you breathe, you have to wear a mask nonsense. This is the same kind of logic. Because you breathe, because you can earn a living, you have to pay tax. It's nonsense. Quoting further, Thailand is preparing to launch one of the most comprehensive tax overhauls in its modern history. And who asked for that? Who voted for that? Is that what everybody voted in? I mean, and this is Pheu Thai pushing this. I'll get to that in a moment. And by the way, I'm starting to think that especially these past prime ministers currently suspended and the past one are just WEF shills. You know, quoting directly, despite political instability, a border crisis with Cambodia, and fallout from the new U.S. tariff regime. Yeah, amidst all of that, this government's big plan is, hey, let's hyper-scrutinize all of our own people and squeeze the heck out of them for their wealth. Meanwhile, again, tourism is down. So many people in that sector are not making as much money as they otherwise would. Tariffs are now coming online, so manufacturing is going to already be under intense negative pressures. And we've also got this border crisis. You know, so now is a good time to come in and lean on everybody for a bunch more money? Quoting further, the Pheu Thai-led regime government is pressing ahead with reforms aimed at reshaping the country's economic foundations. And by reshaping, you mean completely destroying it with communistic tactics. That's what's going to happen here. You come in with all of this stuff and people the economy goes moribund. That's what occurs. And by the way, history is littered with the corpses of economies that took these measures. Most notably, the USSR. There is a reason the Chinese took on capitalistic approaches. Now, they came along later and imposed their own social credit score and totalitarian stuff, which, oh, neato, it looks like they're going to do that in this case too. I have a video I'm making contemporaneously with this one where I get into that as well. That said, quoting further, as the center of the plan is a mandatory filing system requiring all adult citizens and businesses to submit annual tax returns by 2027. This is not a reverse tax scheme. This is mandatory tax for people who don't even owe it. Quoting further, brought to you by the Pheu Thai government. Quoting further, foreign residents will also be included. Oh, so the foreigners also, we get sucked into it. Quoting further, well, not we in my case, but you know what I'm saying. Quoting further, officials say the move will create a complete picture of incomes nationwide, strengthen fiscal discipline, and expand the narrow tax base. You know, in any event, continuing. Thailand will require annual tax returns for all citizens and businesses by 2027 to expand revenues. Currently, only about 4 million people pay tax in a country of 70 million. And I love that's the presumption is, oh, well, there's something inherently wrong with that. No, there isn't. No, there is not. There is not some inherent right of these undue, foreign, bureaucratic-minded influencers to get to tax the heck out of a bunch of working Thais. That is nonsense. Quoting further, former Prime Minister Tariffs has repeatedly called this imbalance unsustainable. Unsustainable for who? A bunch of unelected bureaucrats that don't work for their own living, really? You know, that's what this all comes down to. It's just sucking money parasitically off of those who can afford it the very least in the government. Not in the government, excuse me, in the socioeconomic system of Thailand. It is absolutely ridiculous. It will have an absolutely detrimental impact on Thailand. It's wrong on a moral level, on a almost on a natural law level. It's wrong, you know, and it's all just being touted as, oh, this embattled government. They're carrying on, and they're, you know, as I'll get into in other videos, they talk about a data lake that they want to create because they're going to harvest everybody's data. They want to track and trace everybody. You know, again, since the minute this government came in, what did we see first? What was the first thing they wanted? Digital wallets so they can track and trace everyone. And it was all for, oh, we're going to hand out money. Now they're framing this as it's a reverse tax scheme. You're going to get free money, but we got to track and trace you. Everybody's required to file taxes now. Again, it doesn't look like this has been implemented yet. Again, they noted in there that it's going to come in 2027. I am very, very hopeful that as events play out over the next weeks and months, we're not going to see this government anymore. Because quite frankly, at this point, I don't see what their modus operandi, their raison d'etre is, other than hassling, harassing, scrutinizing, and attempting to unduly tax ordinary working class Thais and foreigners here in the Kingdom of Thailand.